All right, if you can find your seat, that would be very helpful. We'd like to get started. If you haven't signed in, we will let you sign in afterwards over on the tables over there. My name is Troy Stahl. I'm superintendent here at Valley Christian Schools, and we're really excited about tonight. This is a result of about 2 years worth of conversation. We were hoping to have this a couple years ago prior to kind of group events being shut down, but we think this is a really important night. The fact that we've asked someone to come in to our school to speak tells you that this is an area we don't have it all figured out. And I think the fact that you're here as parents or grandparents maybe is saying we don't have it all figured out either. And so we value the partnership with you as parents. And it's our goal to become a learning community, not just as kids and teachers, but with you as parents as well. And it's our goal and our desire to do one of these every fall with our community. So if you're a Valley Christian parent, welcome, and thank you for the partnership. We also know that there are several people here that are here just because their church promoted it, and we invited about 20 local churches to be a part of it as well. We hope this is a blessing to you and your family and to your church as well. Before we get started tonight, I want to invite Jeff Ludington up here. Jeff is pastor of Generations Church over in Cerritos, and their church graciously gave the lead gift to make this night possible. So to thank Jeff, we asked him to open in prayer.
That's all that pastors get to do. We get to open in prayer, right? Well, welcome. I'm glad you're here too. I pastor Generations Church, as Troy said. I also get to teach Bible here. I get to speak in a lot of the chapels here in the middle school. And I'm really excited. I've watched some of the speaking here and some of the content. And so I'm glad you're here. You're invested in your kids' safety and security in their lives. And so I'm going to pray for us. I'm going to pray for our speaker. And would you join me? Would you pray with me? God, as we gather together tonight, we gather around the knowledge, and I'm just what Troy said, we don't have it all together. We don't know all the answers. But what we've learned is that there are risks for our kids. There are dangers there, and we don't always know how to backstop it, God. You give us the charge of our children, of our families, and you teach us to care for them and train them up to follow you. And so when we don't have it, we reach out and we invite people. Tonight we've invited Doug, Lord. We're grateful that he is here with Protect Young Eyes. God, I want to say a prayer for him as he speaks, and a special prayer for his family in Florida. I know they're in kind of the pathway of some of the weather that's headed into Florida. So I want to pray for their safety. It's hard to be in one place, have your family on the other side of the country, and focus on the job at hand. And so I pray that you would pour out your spirit on him tonight as he speaks to us. Will you open our eyes to the realities that are out there? Would you show us the battle that we're in for the eyes and the hearts and the lives of our children? And will you help us to take practical steps together as a community, as church, as school, all of us together to safeguard and protect our most valuable resource, our next generation? Beyond the gospel, our kids are most important. Will you help us tonight in that, Lord? In Jesus' name, amen.
A couple of you asked if this was actually a trick tonight, that we're here to raise money for air conditioning for the gym. We're not, but we would accept your gift. Doug, if you want to come on up. Doug Crawford is a faithful husband to Rose, a father to 5 uniquely gifted children, and friend to everyone he meets. I picked up Doug from the hotel, and I feel like I know him quite well already. He has been with Protect Young Eyes since its early days and is driven by his desire to provide for, prepare, and protect those entrusted to his care. And I think as parents and grandparents, we would say the same. To provide for, to prepare, and protect those who entrusted your care. Doug is frequently interviewed by a variety of outlets in the media, including articles, podcasts, and news stations around the country. With over 20 years of experience helping students and their families around the world, Doug seeks to serve each audience with compassion, integrity, and my favorite description, a dash of whimsical flair. So here he is. Please give a Valley Christian welcome, Mr. Doug Crawford.
How many of you have ever had to write a bio about yourself and you're like, this just sounds so corny? Yeah, so you got to throw in a little bit of something to kind of ease it at the very end. My name is Doug Crawford, and it is my joy to be able to be with you. And as has already been prayed, if the Lord brings to mind the Crawford family and those that live on the Gulf Coast of Florida over the next couple of days, we have potentially 145 mile an hour winds bearing down on our part of the state over the next 48 hours. And so it is my joy to be with you. I have no idea how long I'm going to be in Southern California because I doubt my flights are going to get me home on Wednesday. But it is my joy to be able to be with you, and I'd rather be here than stuck in Atlanta. But that's maybe how things go for me over the next few days. At Protect Young Eyes, we believe that parents are the primary influencers of their children. God has given your kids to you to raise them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Those lights are supposed to turn off, so don't be alarmed. All right? It allows you to see the screen a little bit better. And we realize that parents may feel a little overwhelmed by the digital lives of their kids. We are digital foreigners raising digital natives. We didn't grow up with this stuff. And you'll see my family photo on the next slide, but my now 4-year-old grew up believing every screen was a touch screen. Until I hung my television on the wall, I had so many fingerprints on my television. And for those of us that grew up in a certain area, especially if you had shag carpet in front of your huge wooden console television, you didn't touch your television, it touched you. With an electrical zap that you like, oh my goodness, where's my siblings? I need for them to do this too, to have as much fun as I did doing this. And so we realize as an organization, we want to provide do the research, provide the education and advocacy for you all as you are raising kids in this digital age. Not only do we serve local communities like I'm doing this evening and for your students tomorrow, and other communities like yours around the country and around the world, we also, and you'll see in just a moment, we have been solicited by U.S. government, state government, and tech companies to bring our expertise to light to help create laws that are about the protection of children. To have default settings on devices that come from a posture of protection over permission. And so we want to bring these things and help you in these. And so we talk a lot. Over the last 7 years, we've done over 1,500 talks. I'm sure the number is a little bit more than that. But we are very busy going about and helping families. And before you think, okay, Doug, what do you have to say to me about kids? Have you been a parent? Have you done any of this? If you have an 8-year-old, that's the only age between birth and 24 that I have zero experience parenting. That's because we adopted some of our children when they were 9 and 12, and my oldest biological kid is 7. So I've actually never parented an 8-year-old. That will change in June. But on the top left corner of my family photo is my son-in-law, Marquel. In November of 2020, he married my daughter, Cheyenne. And in this photo, behind her hands, was growing a little boy that in April of this past year was born. And so my 5-month-old grandson, Marquel Jr., is waiting for Grandpa to come and visit him in Michigan next month. And then next to my daughter Cheyenne is my son Ryan. Ryan and Cheyenne are biologically cousins. And they were raised by Ryan's mom, who passed away in 2010 at the age of 37. And I was Cheyenne's youth pastor, and so we said, hey, come live with us. And so that's been 12 years now, and it's been just an awesome opportunity to be able to raise some really amazing young people to love Jesus and to love the church and to love their neighbor. In front of my son Ryan is my wife of almost 20 years, Rose. We are high school sweethearts. In fact, we grew up together. My mother-in-law changed my diapers in the church nursery. There are absolutely zero secrets with the in-laws. And then my son JD, Joshua Douglas, is sitting on Rose's lap. He is the rule follower. And Silas James is sitting on my lap, and he is the reason why we have the rules. And you have kids in both parts of that. And maybe how many of you were the rule followers growing up? I'm raising my hand because I was one of them. How many of you were more like Silas and the reason why they had to make the rules? Absolutely. And God has blessed you with children just like you. And that's just kind of how that goes. And it's one of those beautiful things that we have the opportunity to kind of shepherd and lead both of these strengths. I love that JD has a strong conviction in what is right is what is right, and you do what is right. But he's the one that I think he would follow anybody as long as they were an authority into anything, because it's the right thing to do. You listen to those in authority. Silas, I need to help corral some of that, like, oh, you think you're an authority, eh? And he's kind of on that side. So how do we help and navigate those things? And they approach digital life differently. And so I come to you as a father, I come to you as a husband, I come to you as a grandfather. And I want you to know that there are parts of this, even though I'm the one on stage and you're the one sitting, I don't have all of it put together, and I have failed as a dad too. So we're in this together, and hopefully our time this evening can be a benefit to you. What we have found especially over a time when everybody kind of went and isolated and went virtual, we are seeing the numbers of sexually explicit images of children escalating in an exponential rate. In 2017, NCMEC, which is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, they found that there was nearly 17 million images reported in 2019. And in 2021, the last year that we have completed, nearly 30 million images reported. And that's separate individual photos. The numbers of photos is actually closer to 85 million, but it's just duplicates of the other nearly 30 million being passed around and being reported multiple times. We have a major problem on our hands. And so what we have found is we want to go before those who have the power to do something about it, because sadly the way that the laws and the way that the technology and the internet is currently working, that the ones that it harms the most have the least ability to do anything about it. We call this the inverted responsibility triangle, where we see that the lawmakers are having seemingly very little effect upon them, but they have all the power to do something about it, or the tech companies and those kinds of things. Or then we see children on the other side and impacting them in significant ways, and they don't have a voice. In fact, even when some of them self-report on these apps, they're kind of disregarded. And so we need to realize that things need to change, and we are on the front end of that. In fact, Snapchat just released a couple of parental controls, as they're calling it, in the last month or so, and they sent it to us ahead of time and said, hey, look these over. Can you say something nice about what we're doing? And we said, we'll be honest, and if you did good stuff, we'll tell you did good stuff, and if you didn't, we'll tell you that you didn't. Apple, Google also reach out to us before they release parental controls. And we want to do what we can to help all of our kids grow up in a safer environment. Again, there's going to be dangers everywhere, but we want to mitigate those dangers as much as possible. And there's some really easy ways to go about doing that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take about 6 minutes to play this video. This is Chris's Senate testimony video that he gave in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee in July of 2019. Now that was pre-COVID. A lot of things have changed. Some of the legislation that we were working with had bipartisan support, unanimous within the Senate Judiciary Committee, and things have kind of started ramping up again post-COVID, and that unanimous support still exists. It's just kind of the momentum slowed, and so we're working on getting things going again. But I want you to take 6 minutes or so to listen to Chris's testimony. It really lays the groundwork and the foundation why we are here teaming together to create a safer environment for our kids.
Good morning, Chairman Graham, Senator Blumenthal, and members of the committee. Thank you so much for allowing all of us this opportunity to speak today. I cannot think of a more noble cause for all of us to be spending our time on than the safety and protection of our children. I began Protect Young Eyes 5 years ago because the internet is complex, and even diligent parents are overwhelmed by the digital choices their children are facing. Through thousands of hours of research, hundreds of presentations at schools around the country, and dozens of articles examining digital trends, we have witnessed both the wonderful potential and the troubling and pervasive darkness that exists in the pockets of millions of young people today. I'm certain that in the course of today's discussion, we will hear difficult stories. I wish they were uncommon. In March 2019, CNN reported that Instagram was the leading social media platform for child grooming by sexual predators. Our own test accounts quickly discovered that young people, particularly young girls, can be hunted like prey. We started an Instagram account with 2 photos and tried to mimic the behavior of an average teen girl. We posted 2 selfies with 3 hashtags each, searched a few hashtags, and liked a few photos. Within a week, we had dozens of men sending us images of their genitals, telling us they were horny, and sending us hardcore pornography through direct messages. Even after we told all of them that we were only 12, they were relentless. A recent poll of 2,000 teens found that nearly 75% of them had received pornographic direct messages from strangers on Instagram, even if they had a private account. But you won't find any warnings in the App Store descriptions for Instagram that mention anything about sexual predators, direct message risks, sex trafficking, or hardcore pornography. Instagram's defaults are not set for child safety or data privacy, even though Instagram is rated 12+ by Apple and 13+ by Google. At Protect Young Eyes, we've also seen firsthand the predatory symbiotic relationship that exists between Instagram and Snapchat, both used by 75% of teens today. Many Instagram predators quickly shuttle kids over to Snapchat, where evidence disappears. For example, one relentless pedophile on Instagram who calls himself Daddy invites young girls to join him in Snapchat with Instagram posts like 12+-year-old slave girls, obedient whores only, or hit me up on Snap to be Daddy's naughty girl. Snapchat is where explicit content on Pornhub lives just seconds away from every user through backdoors within the app. The app knowingly allows a well-documented list of porn performers to make thousands of dollars daily through their premium Snap accounts. Snapchat is where harmless-looking face filters can encourage kids to share their location on Snap Map. It's the app that gave a Coors Beer ad to 13-year-olds, even though they tout age gating. It's the app where every kid, regardless of age, has access to the Discover News section, where they are taught how to engage in risky sexual behaviors such as hookup, group, anal, or torture sex, how to sell drugs, and how to hide internet activity from parents using incognito mode. But again, you won't find anything in Snapchat's App Store descriptions that warn parents about premium Snapchat accounts, predator risks of using Snap Maps, or the hyper-sexualized content in Discover News. Snapchat is rated 12+ by Apple and 13+ by Google. Tech companies will tell us that ratings are already in place. However, ratings are not uniform, lack transparency, and there's little accountability for inaccurate ratings. For example, Twitter was rated 4+ for a decade, even though hardcore porn and prostitution was everywhere. It is still breaking Apple and Google's no porn policy, but only claims infrequent or mild sexual content in the app description. Netflix is rated 4+ in Apple's App Store, but teen in Google Play. VPNs, which allow teens to circumvent parental controls, are rated 4+. Most social media platforms are rated 12+ by Apple, even though COPPA restricts use by children until age 13. Obviously, the current app ratings process is broken. Tech companies will tell us that protecting kids is a parent's responsibility. However, this position ignores the ubiquitous nature of the internet. Even if I do everything right to protect my own 14-year-old daughter, with almost 90% of teens owning a smart device, a simple ride on the bus or a visit to a friend's house can expose her to life-altering content. Never before in human history have young people had the ability to so radically change the trajectory of each other's lives so quickly. Tech companies will tell us that safeguards are already in place, but it currently takes over 30 steps to properly set up parental controls on an iPhone. We need to simplify this process to help more parents protect their children. For example, better age-based defaults would instantly and easily protect millions of kids. The addition of easy controls over school and bedtime could shut off distracting apps during these very critical times. Tech companies will tell us that regulating apps is too big of a job. It can't be done. However, video games are already successfully doing it, and the ESRB shows us a path that could be applied by reasonable individuals to apps. In fact, it was Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook who recently said, "I believe we need more effective role for governments and regulators." And we agree. Our hope is to create safer digital places for young people. Two simple solutions could change everything. First, create a uniform, independent, and accountable rating system for apps. And second, enact better defaults based on the age provided during device and app setup. Let's fix this for the kids. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions.
I wish we weren't necessary. And for some of you, that video maybe made you a little uncomfortable. For some of you, that maybe have made you a little upset. For some of you, that maybe broke your heart to realize this is the environment that your kids and grandkids are growing up in. Maybe all of them. And so we have partnered, again, I say, on the federal level, on the state level. We've worked with a variety of states. We've done some international work, trying to help create legislation that is going to hold accountable those that have created platforms that are being used to harm children. And that's not to say that we are an anti-tech company. That's absolutely not the case. We're a pro-tech company. We just want to make certain that these environments that our kids are being raised in is going to be as safe as possible. And so what we do is we go around and we help, and we want to do everything that we can to provide those environments for you all. There's going to be a number of slides here. If it looks like a design like this is a blog post that we have written, and so you can find and read more about any of these on our blog. Some of them will even have QR codes, and a QR code is that pixelated square that you're seeing throughout the notes, and you'll see it on the screens as well. I have no problem you picking up your phone and in the middle of my talk, taking pictures, opening links, doing all those things. In fact, it's really good for our website SEO, and I have no problem with you doing that, all right? So, but we want to be able to provide resources for you. As an organization, we also believe that, again, there is a deep-rootedness in the Word of God when it applies to our responsibility as parents to train up our children the way they should go. In fact, in Deuteronomy chapter 6, we see these words written, "And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on your doorposts and of your house and on your gates." And these words were what we have come to know as the Shema, which is the Lord our God, the Lord is one. As parents, especially as Christian parents, it is our responsibility to allow and to have the Word of God influence every area of our parenting, including our use of technology. And so we want you to guide, we want you to pray, we want you to beg for the heart of your child, we want you to do everything possible, but there's also some very simple, practical things that you can do on the devices that you have in your home. Whether it's the router or the devices that they're on themselves, or where all of these devices are allowed to be used, all of these kinds of things, we're going to talk through them this evening. At Protect Young Eyes, we hold some pretty strong views. Based on all of our research that we have done, we don't believe that kids should have social media before the age 15. And I don't think that a child is ready for all of the privileges and all of the dangers of a smartphone before high school. Now you're like, well, Doug, that's kind of impossible to enforce. Maybe. We're going to talk about some ways you can go about that. Again, because for us, we grew up having payphones at school if we needed to get a hold of our parents, right? The high school that I went to was a very large public high school. and there's a whole bank of payphones on the wall outside of the theater, and I found my niche on the stage. I played football my freshman year. We went undefeated, but it had nothing to do with my contributions to the team. In fact, we only lost 3 times from 7th grade through 12th grade. I only played 1 year, so obviously you know that it wasn't because of me. I found my niche on the stage, and so a lot of plays, musicals, dramas, I hear that there's a play or something coming up soon. That was one of the things that I found my niche on in high school, so I had a lot of after-school rehearsals. And I would go to the payphones afterwards. I'm a pastor's son, firstborn of 6 kids. Not a lot of quarters lying around at pastors' homes. And so I would go and call my parents collect after every call, after every rehearsal. And you're like, Doug, that is not saving you money. Well, this is what we would do. When you would dial 0 and then the 10-digit number of your parents, then it would record your name, right? And so I would say, Doug, pick me up. And so my parents at their home would pick up the phone and they would say, you have a collect call from Doug, pick me up. And they would decline the call and they would get in the car and they would come and pick me up. All right, we saved a lot of change that year and those 4 years that I was in high school. And so, but we don't have that. How do we get access to our kids? There's ways to go about that. We're going to talk to you about those this evening. No middle school child is a better version of themselves in any way, if social media is a part of their life. In fact, COPA, the Child Online Privacy Protection Act, says that you can't have social media, most of these social media accounts, until you're age 13. Yet every elementary and middle school that I have spoken in the 5 years I've been traveling the country speaking on behalf of Protect Young Eyes, has students under the age of 13 that have Instagram and Snapchat accounts. And the reason for that, and Chris even referenced that in his testimony, there's no age verification process. And so when I talk to middle schools, I say, hey, especially to the young ladies, those things that allow you as a 12-year-old girl to say that you're a 15-year-old girl on Instagram are the same things that would allow me as a 41-year-old man to say that I'm a 15-year-old girl on Instagram. Now, I would never do that. I'm an honest person, but not everybody in this world is. And so we realize that, again, as the brain develops from back to front, and the prefrontal cortex is kind of like the brakes of the brain. The thinking, reasoning part of the brain. This is why you have said probably multiple times to your kids already, what were you thinking? And your parents said to you when you were that age as well, what were you thinking? Well, that part of the brain wasn't fully developed yet. They're all go and no slow. And so they just aren't ready. They just aren't ready. In fact, the prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until your mid-20s. That doesn't sell very well to say, hey, social media, you really shouldn't have it until you're 27. You can get alcohol, cigarettes, and fight for your country, but you can't have Snapchat, right? So we realize that there's things that we just have to recognize, but we need to realize that for some of you also, that this ship has totally sailed. You have 13 and 14-year-olds, maybe you have 10-year-olds that have these accounts, you're like, oh man, this is going to be a tough week. As you go and maybe you start making some changes in the technological platforms and the rules within your house over this next week, you're like, Doug, why did you show up? I liked what you had to say, but I didn't like what that meant for my family. We are not here to shame you in any way. So whether you've said no, slow, or go, the ubiquity of technology demands that we have these kinds of conversations with our children to prepare them for life online. And so my goal for you is to walk away encouraged in some of the things you're doing really well. My goal is for you to walk away informed about some of the things that we're going to talk about. So I'm like, oh wow, that's really helpful. And hopefully you walk away determined to create safer digital environments in your household and to influence the children that come into your household for the glory of God and for their flourishing. So what we've done at Protect Young Eyes, we say, okay, what are some basic tips that we can give to parents? How can we, what is a key element to all of this? And I would say that it's trust. We live in households where our kids don't tell us everything, because if they did, they wouldn't trust us to do what they think is best for them with that information. We're going to take their device away from them. We're going to ground them from it for a month. We're going to do this, that, and the other thing. So I don't trust you to do what's, in my opinion, best for me if I share this information with you. And then as parents going to our kids, we don't trust them because we think that every kid that is doing stuff online is probably doing bad things. And our kids are like, Mom, Dad, why don't you just trust me? Not everybody's doing bad stuff. And so what we found is if we can find a way to develop this trust in the digital lives, this will flow into the relationships beyond technology in the lives of our households. And so we've created this digital trust framework. And so we find that people on this side that tend to be more the control freaks. Who are the control freaks in the room? Come on, this is your chance to stand and control about 7 seconds of the talk. All right, there you go, perfect. All right, so those kinds of activities, if we're not careful, can erode that digital trust. We're the parents that are spying on our kids. And I'm not saying monitoring and filtering is bad. I'm saying let them know. There's no reason why you need to be hiding that information from them. So that's spying. All right? Or you're hovering all the time, or you're working from a position of fear, you want to control everything. This kind of activity erodes digital trust, and you're going to just really annoy your kids. Some of you had parents on this side, and so you've swung the pendulum over here. And you are avoiding this trust. You are the parent who is passive, or you see something, you're silent, or all these kinds of things you want to ignore, you don't want to learn more about this, or you're kind of apathetic. Hey, I had these kind of things when I was in high school. There was porn when I was a kid, and I turned out okay. And you're kind of evading your responsibility. The hard work is here in the center. And you better believe 2 former ministers came up with these 5 C's, because it's alliterated. You notice the provide, prepare, protect in my bio? Yeah. It's a disease that we pastors, we just think of things that rhyme and are alliterated. I don't know why. So copy me, co-play, curiosity, conversation, and coaching. These are the 5 C's that we're going to spend the majority of our time discussing the rest of our evening together. Copy me. This is kind of that looking in the mirror of, would I want my kids using their technology the same way that I use mine? Where I use it, how I use it, what I use it for. As the chief disciplers of our children, we need to be modeling the kind of behavior that we want to see replicated in our kids. Out of the 15 years I was a pastor, 12 of them was a youth pastor. And I would do, you know how you do parent teacher, parent kinds of things. I would do pastor-parent conferences. And once a semester, they'd come in and we'd talk about the spiritual development of their kid. Same questions every time. What are you excited about in the life of your kid? What are you concerned about in the life of your kid? How can we pray for you? What questions do you have for me? And that would take an hour, and we would do that every semester. But what was fun is as I got to know the parents a whole lot more, and again, as I got to know the kids a lot more, I could look at each and say, oh, I know where you got that from. That was a mama look, or I've seen that expression in your dad. And you just see these things, and you're like, wow, I can't believe, how do they pick that up? Well, just by watching you. And the same is true when it comes to our use of technology. If you are allowed to bring your cell phone into bedrooms and bathrooms where your kids aren't, you better be able to give a reason why. If you can have your cell phone at the dinner table but your kids can't, you better give a reason why. If you can scroll through an email while your kid is talking to you but they have to put their phone down when you're talking to them. So as parents, we need to be realizing that there are things that our kids are paying attention to. And they have a really good sniffer for hypocrisy. They just do. And it always comes up at the most inconvenient times, doesn't it? Yeah, we're talking about you right now. We're not going to talk about me. We'll handle me later. And then you never get around to handling you. Right? And so, are our kids using their technology like us and then getting in trouble for it? In fact, a good friend of our organization who passed away just a few years ago, very suddenly. His name is Colin Karchner. He said, showing your kids you love them is 2% effort and 98% just putting down your phone. %, effort and just 98% putting down your phone. In fact, USA Today put out an article saying that this last generation's secondhand smoke is now this generation's technology usage. And so we need to realize that our use of technology is having a significant impact and influence on the development of our kids. And what's interesting is in this we see kind of their language development, acquisition of communication skills, and kind of how they are consoled and how they are shown love and all those kinds of things. When they're first born, the kid is agitated, you hold them, you rock them, it's physical, it's the body, it's just close. I love holding kids. I'm the firstborn of 6, and so I grew up holding and taking care of my siblings. But I just love holding kids and rocking them. If they're agitated, getting them to calm down. And then as they develop, it goes beyond body, and they start to figure out some of these emotions. And then they get into language. A friend of mine, she has a little girl who just turned 2, and she's not quite speaking in full English yet. But she's convinced that she's communicating. You ever had those conversations with this? I find it more with little girls than little boys, because it's a little bit older that the boys even start talking. It's more just grunts and sounds. But the girls are looking at you and they're just blah, 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 and they're looking at you and they're convinced that they're telling you something, and they expect for you to understand it and to do whatever it was that they told you or asked you to do. And they're learning these things, and they're figuring out how to relate with their environment through communication and language, and then eventually identifying or establishing their identity. As they grow kind of more individual from you as mom and dad. It becomes less, hey, you are so-and-so's son or daughter, and then it comes to, oh, you're so-and-so's mom or dad. They have an identity of themselves, and they're growing in that. One interesting experiment was called the still face experiment. And this was done, you can search this on YouTube and you can look this up and watch this, and this is an interesting study. The still face experiment was, again, a mom mirroring behavior, kind of responding and these kinds of things, smiling, and the baby making noises and mommy mirroring that. And then all of a sudden, mommy picks up her phone and just scrolls. And not only is the phone a physical barrier, but also if you've ever looked at yourself when you're scrolling, you're usually pretty still-faced. And if you're responding at all, you're responding to what's on this, not what's out here. And so all of a sudden, within just a short period of time, this little child realizes that all of her tricks aren't working to get mommy's attention. We'll look away and look back to try and re-engage eye contact. We'll do the same things that mommy was just mirroring and try to do these things, and mom's not responding, and within a matter of moments is quite agitated. Our impact and our use of technology impacts our children. In fact, World Health Organization, American Academy of Pediatrics, others have done studies on the development of children, and especially when it relates to screen time. And here's some things that they have areas of agreement. 1, almost no sedentary screen time for ages 0 to 2. Less is almost always best. And look at this third one on the far right. How adults use tech impacts how they use tech. This is a major impact in the way that our kids learn how to use technology. And as we think through this, where we use technology has a major impact in how we use technology. Whether you're 4, 14, or 40, it doesn't matter. You combine these 3 things, and you're going to have a high-risk environment for technology. Maybe at the end of a long day, you're kind of just sitting in bed, everybody's asleep, and it's dark in your room, and you're just bored and scrolling through. We would call this a high-risk environment. This is why, as we've written a blog post on this, the 5 most dangerous places for kids to be online. Bedrooms. That's the place in the entire world they probably feel most safe. Bathrooms. Probably the place where they spend time most sexually exposed. and you're adding an internet-connected camera to that environment. Sleepovers, school buses, and grandma and grandpa's house. And so when we think of these environments that are most dangerous for our kids, we have to realize that this is a major deal and we need to be modeling these kinds of things. Our kids, Shine and Ryan, when they were growing up, cell phones did not go in bedrooms and bathrooms. They didn't. In fact, there'd be times where I'd come, our son Ryan's bedroom was in, do y'all have basements in California? I didn't think you did. They don't have them in Florida where I live now either, and I miss basements because I like cold. That's why I was born for Michigan. And basements are usually 5 to 7 degrees cooler than upstairs without any work at all. And so I always had a bedroom in the basement. Well, Ryan's bedroom was in the basement of our home. And I would come downstairs and he would be laying across the threshold of his bedroom, waist up in the living room, family room, waist down in his bedroom. In our basement, concrete floor, very little pad, carpet. 15 feet from him, a really comfortable sofa. Why he felt like he needed to, that was like, I'm gonna try to be as close to my bedroom and still follow the rules as possible. I don't know what it was, but that's just, I caught him, it wasn't like he was in trouble, he was obeying the rules. I was like, I just didn't get it. Like, who wants to lay down on a concrete floor when there's a really comfortable sofa right there? But no bedrooms and bathrooms. I'm going to show you a quick little video clip. This is, you're going to see a number of these, and the purpose of them, one is the content I think is helpful. Chris requires me to say that. No, I'm just kidding. But this is also, these are examples of the kinds of content that we put out on our Instagram account. So if you have Instagram, you can absolutely go and search Protect Young Eyes and follow us. This is an example of the kind of content that we put out there, and this video specifically relates to Copy Me.
Maybe you've seen me post recently about our Delay is the Way campaign, which is best summarized by our digital trust framework. Friends, we build bridges of digital trust between us and our kids, one brick at a time, slowly and intentionally. The first part of digital trust is Copy Me. Would you want them using their technology just like you, where you use it and how you use it? 3 words to help you think about Copy Me. Number 1, modeling. Friends, if a filter is good for their phone, then it's probably good for yours. If they can't have tech in their room, then you shouldn't have it in your room either. Number 2, announcing, telling them your intentions. I'm going to take this call, but then I'll be done and get right back with you. And then number 3, asking. This is what I call the post with permission rule. In other words, if you're going to take a picture and post it of your kids online, then ask their permission, get their consent. There you go. Copy Me, friends. That's the first part of digital trust, because delay is the way is not a no tech strategy. It's a slow tech strategy.
I want to emphasize that last point. I am so glad that I did not grow up with social media. How many of you are thankful to the creator of all things that Instagram did not exist when you were in middle school and high school, and especially on college campuses? Absolutely. There's a lot of incriminating evidence that stayed in the past because there were not cell phones recording it, right? Absolutely. And so we find that our kids are now growing up, especially if we're really, really active posters on social media, and we are finding our identity and value rooted in all the amazing things that our kids are doing, and not our identity and value being rooted in being created in the image of God and being one for whom Christ died. We can be tempted to post a lot of content with our children, and they're going to grow up with an entire digital footprint they had no control over at all. And so we just need to be thinking about these kinds of things before we hit send. Is this something that my kid would not resent me for? Let's just say in their 30s, because they're going to resent everything in their teens, because they're like, how dare you post that? And like, this is the most beautiful picture of you I've ever taken. I look like such a slob in that picture. And this and you see there's that string that was on my pants right there? Like, I've never seen that before, right? Those kinds of things. You're not going to do anything right at that point in life. And in this modeling kind of behavior, especially as fathers, it can kind of be really easy for us to be the hammer looking for a nail. You know what I'm saying? Where we are looking to bring a thumping and discipline to everything. And we're just constantly, we're looking for that next thing to just get our kids after. Do not exasperate your kids. Raise them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Especially you fathers, you share that title with your heavenly Father. Do it justice. That's one of the most convicting things in my life, to think that there are people that call me dad. And there are some things about the way that I have parented my kids that they're going to have to unlearn to learn accurately who their heavenly Father is. So take that responsibility seriously. So copy me. So the next one, co-play. Joining them in their technology. Shoulder-to-shoulder activities. They open up bridges of conversation and connection with our kids. Again, understanding how your kids use technology by doing technology with them is a wonderful window into their heart. And if this means you need to lose 1,000 times in a row in Super Smash Bros., then you're going to lose 1,000 times in a row in Super Smash Bros. My sons right now on my iPad, they love to play Mario Kart with me. And show days, like the times they can actually watch television, are Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. In fact, Silas learned the days of the week before he was 2 years old, because he knew that on Tuesday it was a certain amount of days until Friday when he could watch some shows. And so that's kind of what we do on the weekends. And that's, you get an hour of television on the weekends each day, and during the week we can run some Mario Kart with Dad. Well, now that I'm away and traveling a little bit more at the beginning of the school year, I've tagged my wife to be the one that plays Mario Kart with the boys. And I will ask JD and Silas, hey, how did Mom do while I was gone? And you can tell they're really trying to find something super positive to say. My wife has absolutely no interest in this at all, and I don't blame her. But they're like, yeah, she did pretty good, Dad. And I'm like, that's great. And Rose is like, I don't get it. But doing these things with them, the shoulder-to-shoulder activity. Again, I was a youth pastor for 12 years. One of the things I loved the most was long road trips within the van with the students. We had a mutual distraction of the open road. And they would just pop, pop, pop. Kids that would never say a dozen words to you all year long. You ride to an amusement park and they can't stop talking. Like, what in the world happened? Well, we were shoulder to shoulder. We had something we're doing together. And we had conversations. We would talk about stuff. This co-play. And so maybe some of you, it's not the social media side of it, but maybe it's the gaming side of it that kind of draws your kids in. Realize that the battle is not between you and your child. The real battle is between your child's brain and the game. Most, if not all, video games use some form of a variable reward system. And you're like, Doug, that doesn't sound like any fun. Well, how many of you know somebody who really likes the slot machines? Right? Okay, maybe this next pull is going to be the one that I'm going to be able to pay off the house. Maybe this next one is going to be I'm going to win. And so you're like, oh, and then you win like $7 even though you put $30 in already. And you're like, okay, maybe the next one's going to be the next one. And that, again, it's a variable reward system. The same thing is true with a lot of these video games. Think of Minecraft. Think of Roblox. Think of these other ones that our kids are playing and realizing that they can go digging for certain things or doing certain things, and all of a sudden there's, something popped up here, which gets them to want to play more and to find more and to do these other different things. And so you have to realize that these games were developed intentionally addictive. That's one of the things that blows my mind, that we have a legally addictive substance that we give for free to our children. Whether it's video games or social media, whatever the case is, these are intended to be addictive. Now, Sean Parker, we're on the West Coast, and maybe some of you know Sean Parker. Most places around the world don't know who he was. But he was the founding president of Facebook. And he left Facebook. And in an interview with Axios, he kind of gave us a little peek behind. How many of you have ever watched The Social Dilemma on Netflix? All right, the interview I'm referencing of Sean Parker is it's also found in The Social Dilemma. And I find that if you have Netflix, I would highly recommend you taking some time to watch it. The problem is, it gives you a lot of we felt really bad, this is what we did, we knew what we were doing, we did it anyway, but you get to the end of it, and like, okay, so what do we do? And they just, the end. And like, okay, it was nice to know that the intentionality and the dopamine hit and all that stuff, and the person, what the goal was when they invented the like button and all these things, this is necessary information, but you get to the end of it and you're like, and we're sorry. And that's it. Next, follow the rating. I promise you, that the people who created, that work for the ESRB, I promise you that their ideas of what's appropriate is probably less conservative than your view of what is appropriate for your child. And so if you are going to let a secular organization determine an age, what's appropriate, and then you let your kids play things that are beyond the age rating, I'm just saying we're opening the world to some things that are a little bit beyond the scope of what our kids need to be interacting with. Next, beware of chat. Every app or game that has a chat feature will have predatory activity. Every single one. YouVersion's Bible app? Absolutely. Instagram? Oh, you better believe it. Anything on an Xbox with a chat? Absolutely. If there's a chat feature, if there's a way for players or users, which is again an interesting term when we're talking about addictions, when users of these technologies use them, the goal is again to have you use to consume as much of your time as possible. But if there's a chat feature within that platform, there is going to be predatory activity on every single one of them. Just that you have to assume. In fact, when we talk to kindergartners, we say if you don't know somebody off the internet, you don't talk to them on the internet. And we inform them if you're playing a game and someone talks to you, you don't know who they are, you put the device down and you tell someone. Give them just basic, simple tips to be able, because this is going to happen. So we need to have these conversations before it happens so they know what to do when it happens. Make a plan and then know your kid. JD and Silas, one of the reasons why it's only an hour on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays is because World War III, in fact, if we have power while the hurricane is going past our house later this week and the television is on, they wouldn't even notice the wind and the rain outside. They are just locked on. And when you stand in front of them, they just kind of go like this. Even as you move, they're not going to engage with you at all. They're kind of, and maybe they'll pause because I'm keep going with them, but they just get locked on. So we limit it for them. That's not always going to be how it is when they're older. Again, they have to learn how to say no eventually. So I'm not going to parent them the same when they're 7 as when they are when they're 14 or when they're 18. Things have got to change, but we have to realize that there's some things going on. And so this co-play, this joining in activity with each other, part of that is recognizing that there's a co-ownership, that we both share this technology. The technology is a we activity, not a me activity. If you find that the technology in your home constantly isolates your family instead of brings you together, it's influencing your family in a negative way. Now, there absolutely needs to be time where you just kind of just veg out and you do the thing on your own. I get it. But if the regular pattern is technology always isolates, then it's bringing damage upon the health and well-being of your family. So we're going to do a quick little quiz to see if we know what some of these apps are, okay? Top left, Among Us, nice work. Top center, top right, bottom right, Discord, well done. Bottom center with the red. To the left of that, to the bottom left, just read it. How many of you have never heard of Be Real until you just saw it on a screen? Go ahead and raise your hand. All right. Just so you know, for the last, I think 6 or 7 weeks, it's been the #1 download in both Apple and Android platforms. Want to read about it? Go to our website. We've written an app review. In fact, we have an app review on over 100 apps that at one time or another were very popular with students. In fact, there's times when apps that were popular kind of fade off, and then all of a sudden, because we pay attention to the rise and fall of what's popular on the downloads, all of a sudden, like out of left field, an app that has been like no man's land for 6 or 7 years cycles back through like, why is this all of a sudden really popular again? But again, we need to be paying attention to those things. And at Protect Young Eyes, we do the work. We have somebody on staff, a researcher who goes and pays attention to those things so that we can then update and create app reviews for things that are kind of rising and falling and those kinds of things. So copy me, co-play, curiosity. If all of your tech conversations are consequence related, all right? kind of the, if you do this, I'm going to take it away kind of thing, or you better not, or you're going to lose your phone, or you use that as kind of a leverage point. Okay, if all of your tech conversations are consequence, negativity, yelling, or just discussions that you're having with your kids, what are the chances that they're going to come and talk to you when something actually really bad happens? None. In their mind, if you blew up on this really tiny little thing, and then now something really serious happens, there's absolutely no way that they're going to come and talk to you about that. So as a parent, how do you work into this so that you can be that top 3 or 4 resource that your kids come to when they have a question? My son Ryan, it's only now in his early 20s that he really gives a rip on what dad has to say. I was available, I would talk, but he really never initiated those conversations. He is now an adult, which I'm so thankful for. Cheyenne, on the other hand, in her head, out her mouth. It didn't matter where we were, what was going on. If she had a question, she was going to ask us. It could be we're at the dinner table, eating dinner, and especially during the time when Cheyenne was becoming a woman, if you understand what I'm saying, there were questions about her period and those kinds of things that would come up at the dinner table. Now, I grew up with 4 sisters. There were enough tampons and pads around my house growing up that kind of conversation does not bother me one bit. In fact, during her pregnancy, she would ask me questions, and I'd be like, sweetheart, I bet mom's probably a better resource than I am on this. I've been around a lot of pregnant women, never been one. There's proof that mom has done this at least twice. They're your brothers. Talk to her, right? There was one time she came to me, and she's like, hey, Daddy. I was like, yeah, what's up? She said, what's erectile dysfunction? All right. Do you know what the word dysfunction means? Start with the easier of the 2 terms. Do you know what dysfunction means? And something doesn't function, it's broken, it doesn't work the way that it's intended to work. I was like, sweetheart, do you know what an erection is? And she looks at me with a face like, I'm pretty certain, but if I'm wrong, this could get a little awkward with my dad. And so she kind of, with a smirk, was like, no. I'm like, well, sweetheart, this is a man's penis. She goes, hold on a second. And she ran out of the room. And 45 seconds later, she comes back in the room with a teddy bear. I'm like, this is weird. She sits on the couch next to me, puts the teddy bear on her lap, plugs the teddy bear's ears, and says, okay, go ahead. And we talked about it. Cheyenne was the child that we had to ban WebMD off of all of her devices. Y'all have that kid that's dying of everything on any day that ends with Y, right? That was Cheyenne. And the hard thing was, again, her primary caretaker died when she was 12. So she watched somebody very young die. And so there was obviously some things that contributed to that. But for her, it was, she would search stuff. And again, the internet is always going to give you bad news. And so we had to ban, in fact, all of her devices. She was not allowed to go to WebMD. And so, but again, that's part of knowing the kid, but allowing that environment where they know that they can come and ask these questions honestly. And that you can ask them questions honestly. Hey, what are some of the apps that are really popular with your friends right now? Whether your child has a device or not. What are some of the apps that are really popular with your friends right now? Hey, are there any YouTube channels that you've heard of that you think I'd be really interested in? Is anybody that you didn't know try to talk to you and you didn't? How did you respond? Has anybody ever sent an inappropriate picture to you? How did you respond? And remember to not freak out when they give their answer. I was just up the coast from y'all 2 weeks ago in Oregon, in Eastern Oregon, and it's a conference I've spoken at 3 times now. The county holds a one-day conference for all of the 7th graders of the county. And it meets at Eastern Oregon University, and I've spoken there multiple times for this conference. And I'll ask the 7th graders, how many of you have ever had somebody you didn't know talk to you on a device? Most of the hands up. How many of you have ever had somebody send an inappropriate picture to you? Half? This is 7th graders. How many of you didn't even know the person? A third to a half of those who raised their hands that I didn't know who it was. 7th graders. And so we need to be mindful that these kinds of things, and we're only going to know about this stuff by asking the questions, but we need to make certain that when they give their honest answer, that we don't overreact. Like, compose yourself, hold it in as long as you can, and then go into the garage and just wail on stuff. I don't care what, but don't let them see it. But have that time where you can sit and listen. I remember the first time that Ryan, from our experience, and him living in our home, the first time that we learned that he had seen pornographic content. And we had monitoring and filtering stuff on the devices, and he had just changed schools. We kept him in the charter school that they were in for the first couple of years to kind of keep some things the same as they moved into a new house. And then we brought them into the district that we lived in. And he's trying to meet new friends. And some of his buddies that he's meeting saying, hey, you should go and search this. He goes home, goes to Google, searches it, finds out what it is, shows up on our report. And I'm like, well, I know it wasn't me. I asked Rose, it wasn't her. I asked Cheyenne, it wasn't her. And I came and asked Ryan, he didn't have to answer verbally because he just started crying. And this is a young man who, because of his past, would never have been drawn to that kind of content. And if I had blown it in that moment, and I'm thankful that I didn't that time. There's plenty of other times that I blew it. But in that moment, if I had blown it, it was going to be a long time before I was going to get any sort of trust back from that kid. So give them some grace. If you've never taught them what you want them to do, why would we expect them to do what you want them to do? Let them fail in that. Ask the question and then say, hey, moving forward, moving into conversations, we'll talk about this in a second, but going into conversations, then express to them how you want them to handle it in the future. And then if they go against that, then you can bring correction and discipline. But if they've never heard the rule, you can't expect them to enforce it on themselves. In fact, when it comes to this kind of content, we've actually written in a blog post of why kids even go to pornography. And I gotta let you know, most kids, well, I'll go like this to make it a little easier for you guys. For most kids, it isn't sexual lust that brings them to pornography, at least at first. There's a variety of other reasons. I find many times our young ladies go because there's expectations that they think that the boys are going to have if they want to have a relationship. They need to know how to behave to be able to get and keep a boyfriend. And many times with the guys, it's not always that way with the girls, it's not always this way with the guys, but I find in my observation many times with the guys, it's that locker room talk. And if you don't know what you're talking about, then you feel like you're not as much of a man and you kind of can get mocked because you've not seen that kind of stuff. And so our identity kind of gets wrapped up in it. And for our young ladies, our daughters, it's kind of their value gets wrapped up in it. And as parents, again, we want to be making certain that their identity is rooted in being created in the image of God. And their value is they are one for whom Christ died. Their identity and value is rooted in God who does not change. It is not in the amount of likes, comments, and followers that they have on Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok. And that's at the heart of what our middle school and high school talk is going to be tomorrow. That they matter because of who God has made them to be. So why is curiosity so important? Honestly, to ask these questions, because if we grew up in these ages, we would have done some of the exact same things that our kids are doing. So we have to ask and not bring the rod of correction right away. So copy me, co-play, curiosity, conversation. Talk to your kids again about all the stuff that no one talked to you about. I had, at least that I remember, one sex talk with my dad. I think I was like 10 years old. We lived in Michigan. How many of you are from Michigan or have connections to Michigan? Because it seems like I keep bumping up into people that are from the Michigan area out here. I don't blame you. I live in Florida now, right? But if you go through this, we're huge Detroit Pistons fans. And so my dad took me to a Pistons game. We lived in Grand Rapids, so the west side of the state, we had to drive across the state, so we had 2.5 hours of really awkward conversation. But the only thing that I remember, the tickets for the game were at the church office where my dad was a pastor. So we drive up to the church, we're getting ready to go in, and before he goes into the office and leaves me alone with all of my thoughts, he's like, Doug, what do you think about sex? I can't believe my dad just said that word. I'm like, it's bad? And then he left me alone in the car by myself for like 5 minutes to go get his tickets. That's the only thing I remember about that entire day. I don't remember the Pistons game. I don't remember the drive there or back. I just remember that my dad said the word sex and that my mom and dad did that. That's it. Obviously, I figured it out. I have 2 kids. But one of the things that we need to realize, though, is that if that's all that we're doing, if it's like, okay, we're going to have one talk, and if my opinion changes about it, then I'll let you know then. There are a lot of educators, online and offline, that have education and information about human sexuality that they are very willing to give to your kids. And it's very possible that those views and opinions may conflict with yours. So how are you setting up your kids to know that when they see something that is contrary to what the Word of God has said, or if they see pornography for the first time, their buddy's like, hey, look at this, and they say, oh, I know what that is, my dad's already talked to me about it, I'm not interested. So, what would you say is the right age to talk to your kids about pornography? This is a time for interaction. 12, 9, 5, 2. Honestly, I will let you know that we will talk about the concept of pornography with kindergartners tomorrow, but I will not use the term before 7th grade. We talk about if you ever see pictures of people that show parts that are usually covered by their swimsuit, or a picture that makes you feel uncomfortable, or maybe is a bad picture, or something like that. We can talk about, in fact, good pictures, bad pictures was on the resource table over there. There's a good pictures, bad pictures junior book. That one's kind of like 3 to 7-year-olds, and the good pictures, bad pictures book is like 8 to 10-year-olds. There are age-appropriate ways that you can talk about these concepts without having to use all of the terms. So we wrote a blog post about it. How to talk to a 5-year-old. Now again, I'm not using the term, if there are 6th graders in our middle school presentation, I ask the person in charge, can I use the term pornography or no? Especially early on, because right now 6th graders are like just really big 5th graders. Right? And so I get permission from the school to use that in the high school talk. If you haven't talked to your kids about pornography and they're in high school, you're behind. And so we'll talk about the concept and from a God-honoring perspective. But I want you to know that there are ways that we can have age-appropriate conversations with our kids. And we need to have these conversations with them. Because if we don't, Dr. Google, Dr. TikTok, Dr. YouTube will, and their offices are open 24/7. So, this is a strange thing to say. But we want to remove the mysteriousness of this. We want them to realize that there is content out there that is not appropriate, that is actually, we have no idea what is actually going on, if what is on screen is consensual. There is so much abuse and human trafficking that goes on through this industry that you have no idea. And if this is your understanding of what love looks like, love is not selfish, it is selfless. And there's a whole lot of selfishness going on in this industry. So how do we set those defaults of what appropriate human love looks like with our kids? Again, this is a term that we will, when I'm talking to the elementary school kids, I'll split the room in half. In this room side, I'll say, okay, when I point to you, I want you to say, put it down, and they do a hand motion like this. And I say, when I point to this side, I want you to say, tell someone, and they'll put their hands around their mouths and say, tell someone. And we start with a whisper. And they talk, and they whisper, put it down, tell someone. And we get to the point where they're shouting at the top of their lungs. They finally get a chance. It's okay, because some of your kids have been looking for a reason to shout without getting in trouble for a really long time. And it shows in our talks. But letting them know, put it down and tell someone. And we go through, who are those someones? What if it happened at home? We tell our mom and dad. Cool. What if it happened at school? Our teacher or principal. What if it happened at church? What if it happened at a friend's house? And we go through some of those scenarios. Okay, if you see something or somebody you don't know tries to talk to you, whatever the case is, put the device down and tell someone. And then help them think through a list of safe people that they can talk to. Now, realizing that, again, this kind of content is addictive. If you're finding that your child's behavior is becoming excessive when it comes to pornographic content, or they can't seem to stop even when you've brought in, whether it's filtering or monitoring, or you have open conversations about it, or their preferences are becoming bizarre, illegal, or maybe they're engaging in sexual activity with people they're meeting online, whether it's sending nudes or meeting up with people. Or if they say, Mom, Dad, I'm struggling, I need to talk to somebody. Please do not try to convince them otherwise. If your kid says, I need to talk about something that I'm struggling with, please believe them and don't view it as a failure in your parenting. You haven't failed. In fact, getting your child the help that they need is one of the most loving, selfless things that you can do. Because you're doing it for the benefit of your child. So we have to talk, this is the term that we use when we talk about online predators. We don't use the term with elementary school students. We call them tricky people. And so we realize that for some of us, when we grew up, maybe if there was a van with no windows and some person giving out ice cream and puppies to children at a park, your parents would say, don't go over there. And they may call the non-emergency police number and say, can you just have a patrol person just kind of drive past such and such park and just check this out because it seems to be a little off. We used to determine some of those things based on what somebody looked like. This just doesn't seem to be right. But in a digital age, you can pretend to be whomever you want to be. And so we need to realize what stranger danger looks like in the digital age. In fact, here's another tidbit from Chris.
A really important phrase that you can give your kids is this. Honey, if something feels weird, then it probably is. This is a really great phrase, whether in the digital life or in real life. Give kids permission to follow through. They know what you mean when you say to them, you know when you get that little funny feeling in your stomach? Something just doesn't feel right? Say to them, honey, if it feels weird, then it probably is. That means when you're talking to somebody online or somebody sends you something or you ever see something both in real life and in your digital life, honey, if it feels weird, then it probably is. Give your kids that permission. And then when they feel that, tell them exactly what to do. Put it down and tell someone. And give them a list of someones, you, a brother, a sister, somebody, an adult who can help them so they know exactly what to do.
And so a major question for this, if we're going to have these kinds of conversations, if we're going to ask these kinds of questions, then we really need to have created an environment where our kids feel as though that they can always land softly with us. Do your kids know that they can come and talk to you about anything? Have you modeled that in the past? If not, maybe one of your take-homes from this evening's talk is to have a conversation with your kids that begins with an apology. And say, guys, I'm sorry. There's some things that I've been thinking about for a while, but it just kind of became really clear at the talk tonight, and I just got to say that I am sorry for some of the ways that I've handled this in the past. And I'm going to try to be more gracious towards you, but I'm also going to ask you to try to be more gracious towards me. Will you please forgive me? Again, model the kind of behavior you want to see replicated in your kids. They need to know when a broken relationship is restored by forgiveness, they need to see that pattern in our lives. So they know how to handle it when they've done something that has broken or severed a relationship. Does your child know that beyond any doubt that he or she can land softly with you? Again, a gentle answer turns away wrath. So we have opportunity to kind of have these conversations and talk with our kids. Help them navigate these things. Then the last thing is coaching. How many of you have ever coached any sort of sport or competitive group? How many have ever been a coach for anybody? All right. So as a coach, when it's time for the competition, whether it's on the pitch or the field or the court, or it's some robotics team or whatever it is, drama, did you play or engage during the competition? You didn't. You prepped the players, the competitors, to be ready for the competition. The same is true in our parenting. We are not going to be able to do everything for them, but we need to do the work so that when it's time to perform, when it's time to act, when it's time to engage, they know what to do. I am a very large University of Michigan football fan. Go Blue. That's little brother. Someone said go Green, being Michigan State. A lot of friends that made bad decisions went to school there, but they're doing fine. But when you're watching a game, and you can tell when a team has been well coached, because when the defense does something, you can tell that they call an audible, or when the offense does something, all of a sudden you see this person go there and they move and they adjust and they do all this stuff. How do they know to do that? Well, because they've been prepped and ready for that. They saw what was coming at them and they corrected and changed what they were going to do and did something different. This is true in so many different areas of life. But we need to also be thinking of coaching our kids to be ready for their digital lives as well. Because we are not always going to be there with them, making all the decisions for them. So how are we prepping them for life outside of the home? How are we prepping them for life to have the device even before they have the device? Or once they have the device, before you allow them to download certain apps? What are you doing in that process? Again, not parental controls, but caring controls, and prepping them and bringing them into the process, giving them advocacy, agency. Say, hey, we want to set up some rules in the house. Here's some of the things that we're thinking. What kind of rules do you think that we should have? What sounds fair? Knowing that you always have veto power, but bring them into the process. Or maybe it's like, hey, I've learned tonight that there's settings on our router that we can set up that will hopefully mitigate some of the pornographic content or inappropriate content that comes through our internet. I have no idea how to do that. So you ask your 7-year-old, because for some reason they innately know how. But in the process, again, we're not spying on them. We're not withholding information. Just say, hey, I want to let you know you're going to show me how to do all this. In fact, you're even going to show me how to change the password. And then after we're done with all of this, I'm going to change the password so that you can't log in and change everything back to what's good for you, because I still have no idea what we just did. But at least bring them into the process. Give them agency. Again, any rule that they help create is one that they're going to be more bound to obey. You want to know how I know this works? Watch any of your kids make up a game and make up rules. For some reason, they're going to argue about some of the rules, but they're eventually going to come to an agreement so that the game can go on. Bring them into the process. There were things that, again, were true when Ryan was 12 about his connection and interaction with technology that were different and changed when he was 14 or 16 or 18. I wanted him to fail while he still lived under my roof. But he needed to have the leash and the allowances to actually fail. Say, hey, this is kind of why we've been talking about this stuff. This is how easy it is to slip in this area. And then give them more tools and resources to be able to have success later on. Again, coaching. This is a me with you. This is a me for you. When you succeed, we all succeed. This is not me battling against you. I want you to win. I want you to have success. I want you to interact with this technology. But if we're going to do this, we're going to set some things up to create greater success.
That's right. The head of an internet safety organization can't stand the phrase parental controls. Why? Because I think it sets us up for the wrong relationship with our kids. I mean, think about the 14-year-old version of you, and your mom or dad come up to you and they say, guess what, honey? I've got this great idea for your teen years. It's called parental control.
Friends, if we go into this thinking we're going to control our kids, we're going to do it wrong, and they'll smell it a mile away. The software is intended to not catch them do something wrong, but encourage them to do something good, to root for them, to cheer for them. We want them to succeed, and if you delay technology, not giving them that smartphone until their early high school years, which is what we want, that means for 10 years they've been hearing from you that you're involved, that there's co-ownership. Go watch our other reel about that. And so when you give them that smartphone and you put covenant eyes or you put bark on it, it's no big deal because it's just a part of their DNA. Why? Because it's carrying control, not parental control.
So one of the things that we established, and I kind of ran the trials at my house because we tended to be mi casa su casa. Throughout life, we've had so many different people live with us, whether we were foster parents or we kid in the youth group that parents takes a job overseas their senior year and he lives with us. Whatever the case is, I had a lot of people that were not a part of my family that lived in my house. And so we were like, okay, we got to come up with some things here, some ground rules. And so I called it a digital code of conduct, but that sounds really kind of rigid. And so we've come up with a digital trust playbook. And this is a document that you can print out and you and your kids kind of come to some conclusions on some things that you're going to have the rules. How long can somebody be on a device? Where can they be on a device? We're talking about co-ownership. We have device ownership on the top left, time on the top right, location, privacy, safety, all these kinds of things. And then there's a signature line where both you and your child sign it saying, we agree to this. Now this can be amended. Again, as they get older, there's going to be some things that the rules are going to have to change. So you change those things and you create a new document. But at least it gives you a third-party influence in the midst of your discussion on what they can do, where they can go, all those kinds of things. Hey, we agreed to this, you signed this. Well, Dad, you wouldn't let me have a phone if I didn't. I know. But we agreed to this, and we walked through this together. And if you honestly think that things are unfair, I want you to put together a really good description for why, and we'll talk about it. I was that dad that had his son write at least one-page paper when he wanted to get his first tattoo and his ears pierced. I was like, give me a reason why. Your body's the temple of the Holy Spirit. I have no problem with you having tattoos or piercings. But I want you to kind of just think through this theologically. Why is this something that you should do, not that you could do? And so we talked to him, and he came through, and he's like, okay. He put it together. I was like, okay, cool. For me, it was almost, I didn't care what conclusion he came to, but I wanted him to take the time to think through something before he made a decision that potentially could impact him for a while. And his first tattoo, it's across his thigh right here, and in Roman numerals, it's the date that he was baptized. I'm like, cool. So when people see that, they can ask about it and say, all right, what does that mean? What is that? And it gives you an opportunity. All right, cool. That's awesome. He made it a dolphin, which is kind of weird for a 20-year-old kid, but his mom loved dolphins, and that was going to be a nod to having a dolphin. And I was like, dude, if you get a dolphin, make it look like a really tough dolphin. Don't make it a cute one on your ankle. I'm just telling you. If you want to, more power to you. I'm just letting you know. Put it by your heart because it's for your mom and you love her and we miss her terribly. But if you want to do that, cool, right? But at least think about something. Work through this process. Another helpful tip is finding the right hardware. Now, if you love the router that you have in your home, awesome. If you think that there are things about your router like, I don't really love that. Well, we realize that for most of us, we don't even think about our routers until it goes down and the smart devices no longer have access to the internet and we get really frustrated and bent out of shape, right? That happens, that's okay. But one of the things, if you don't love the settings, or if you think, you know what, I wish that there was a better router that had better controls that I could set up within the router itself and not even need some of the monitoring and filtering of other third-party devices, I wanted to let you know that Griffin makes the best router out there. Now the one in the center, the Griffin Guardian, the one that's $79, that one is good for maybe 12 to 1,500 square foot at home. Get much larger than that, you either have to get multiples of it or you go to the Griffin Tower, which is the one on the left. Their newest router is the Griffin AX. It's on the far right. It has the most advanced mesh technology and all those other kinds of different things. We're not going to nerd out on some of that because some of you, I just said mesh, you're like, I don't even know what that is. So that's okay. But again, there are ways that you can go ahead, and we have found them to be the best out there. All right? And so if that's something that you're interested in, awesome. If I saw the raffle table correctly, one of those is being given away in the raffle tonight. So one of you is going to walk home with one tonight. So that's awesome. Gab Wireless, where I said earlier that we're going to talk about an alternative to giving your kid your old iPhone or Android phone when you upgrade, and you just hand it over to them. We think Gab Wireless is doing some of the best work out there. Non-social media, non-internet smartphone. My son Ryan, he played in the marching band in high school. And so after school rehearsals, I would get phone calls from numbers that were not stored in my phone on a regular basis. Because he had a track phone that we had given to him, and he was quite embarrassed to take that out of his backpack. So he would borrow his buddies' phones and call us after band rehearsal and say, "Hey Dad, we're done, can you come pick me up?" I was like, cool, that means you're not getting out in class because you're not even getting out to give me a call. But there are ways, again, that we can give these devices. If you look at them, again, they look like pretty awesome phones. They have a smart watch. They have a full touchscreen cell phone. Again, there are, I'd say the watch is really kind of, when you're thinking that, upper elementary age, awesome resource. Again, it has GPS on it, so you know where your kid is. There's some preloaded kind of texts and contacts there. There's a calculator. There's not a ton on there, which is awesome. But it gives them a way and gives you a way to be in contact with each other. So that's hardware. Then software. There's a variety of different softwares that are out there. But what I would encourage you to do is just to find something that works for your family. So whether it's Covenant Eyes or what's the hourglass symbol? Screen time. That's the Apple device parental controls, which iOS 16, which started rolling out 2 weeks ago, has some of it. They have made more advances in child safety and parental controls with iOS 16 than they have with any of their other releases. And if you want to read about that, go to our website, look at our blog page. We've written, in fact, Apple released their stuff, and our review of it went out. I mean, we've had iOS 16 since the beginning of the summer, but it's rolling out these last couple of weeks. I highly recommend that you read that and you find out what some of the things that they've done and they've added to some of their controls, because they're finally starting to listen. The Kite. Anybody know what the Kite represents? Family Link. This is the parental controls on an Android device. Again, last year, and the Chromebooks rolled out with some better parental controls. Again, some of the work that we were doing with them. They're trending in the right direction, but there's still a lot of work to do. And then Bark is, when it comes to monitoring social media, it does better than just about everybody out there. It's a company that's based out of Atlanta. They're doing some pretty awesome things. Titania Jordan is, that lady, she is going all out on trying to create safer environments and protecting kids. I think that her title is the Chief Family Officer, I think is what her title is there. And she is a mama bear that you don't want to mess with. And she is crushing it over at Bark. She's awesome. Real good friend of Protect Young Eyes. But again, in a digital world that is increasingly hostile towards your kids, we need to be creating environments that, and preparing kids that are prepared. Our approaches need to be balanced, and we need to do everything we can to protect them. And there are a lot of ways you can go about doing that, but none of it is going to be significantly as helpful if we don't have an environment of trust created within our kids, within our homes, having these conversations with them. And so, again, copy me, co-play, curiosity, conversation, and coaching. Some of the other resources that we provide at Protect Young Eyes, we have a monthly newsletter that we put out there. It's called The Download, and that'll make it a little bit easier to scan the QR code. And if you scan this, it'll ask you to put in your email address. Please use the one that you actually check and not the one you use to get free dessert on your birthday. And you know that there's different ones, okay? This is stuff that we again, our on-staff researcher is putting stuff together, and every month putting out a newsletter. And you would have learned about Be Real last month if you would have been subscribed to our stuff. We pay attention to what the increase in the interests are. We look at if there's stories and different things that are related to our content that we're concerned about. Those kinds of things come up there and just shows up in your inbox. So that's that. The school has graciously got an account for all of you to download our app. All right? So that was a very generous gift that is being provided to you. So if you search Protect Young Eyes in your app store, go ahead right now. I have no problem with you doing this. Again, this is something that, I can't believe this guy keeps letting me get my cell phone on. I haven't looked at anything. I put it up there to make it look like I'm taking a picture, but it's Monday Night Football right now, so I'm kind of, I don't care. But if you search Protect Young Eyes in either your Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, you download our app, and then after you create a profile, in the settings there will be, or when you're creating it, there will be a registration code so SSDIBW. That does not stand for anything, so don't try to figure it out, okay? No, it's not an alliteration for anything, or it's just SSDIBW. That is your code, and you have full access to all of the content on our app. And in there, it's going to be kind of bite-sized lessons of taking some of these bigger concepts and breaking them down, whether it's how to set up parental controls on an iPhone, or maybe you are in a divorced or split relationship and your kids kind of live life in two different households. We have a lesson on co-parenting that we had a divorced mom say, hey, we asked, okay, what are some of the things that you do to help try to create when you have different opinions on what are going to be, and you have different rules at dad's house than you have at mom's house? How do you navigate that? We had her put together our co-parenting lesson on that. And there's also on our app, there's content that you can't get really anywhere else, is videos for you to watch with your kids. And then there's discussion questions for you to have conversations with afterwards. We want to make this a great resource for you. And so again, this is available to all of you, and this code the school will be making available to you as well, but I just wanted to make certain that it made it onto the screen for the Protect app. A lot of you said you have watched The Social Dilemma. How many of you have watched Childhood 2.0? That is usually the response that we get. This is an incredible, about 2-hour documentary. Funded, underwritten in a major way by Bark. You will recognize one of the people interviewed in it because you saw his Senate testimony video earlier. But Chris, our founder and CEO, is one of the experts interviewed in this documentary. There are also students that are interviewed in this. There are other experts that are interviewed in this. And this is one of those things that I highly recommend that you take the 2 hours to watch this. And then you think, okay, which of our kids can we watch this with when I watch this a second time? And when there's things there, you can hit pause and ask the questions, that curiosity, conversation, coaching. You can do all of that and say, hey, is this really how it's like for you? Or you can pause and say, hey, this is something that actually is important to me. Or your kids can say, hey, can you rewind that and talk? But to let this be something that you can talk through together. Again, Childhood 2.0. We are very active on social media, which again, we are a pro-tech company. So it may feel a little ironic that we talk about the dangers of this, and we say that we're there too. But we're trying to create content that is going to be available for people where they are. I would say if you, out of any of these that you pick, if you're going to pick one, Instagram is probably our most active, but we are posting stuff on Facebook and YouTube as well. But Instagram, those kinds of videos, those short videos and parent tips that you've seen from Chris, that's the kind of content that we're putting out there. We're sharing a variety of different things. Some of the pictures taken from tonight's presentation will show up, and so you say, oh, look, I made it onto Instagram. See, you didn't get to control that. It's where you control people. You missed out, right? But we want to make certain that we are creating content that is helpful for parents. It is my joy to be able to bring all of this to you, to spend however long that we've spent talking about this, to make certain that we are creating digital environments that are for the glory of God and for the flourishing of our kids. Are there any questions that you feel confident enough to ask in front of a whole large crowd of people? Yes, go ahead. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, so the question is, when I'm talking to middle school and high school students tomorrow, am I going to be diving into some of the deeper, scarier parts about the social media platforms like I did this evening? Is that correct? And even more? This is a parent presentation, and so I dive into things a little bit more deeply here. The heartbeat of our middle school and high school presentation is to remind them, and I'll give you again, you're going to find out, hey, there's another pastor's alliteration there. The title of the talk is You Matter. And you matter because your identity is rooted in the image, you're created in the image of God. Your value is one for whom Christ died. You matter, you're human. And if humans matter, that means all humans matter. And if all humans matter, then what you see matters. We'll talk about pornography a little bit. In the middle school one, we won't use the term, but we'll talk about the concept. The high school one, we'll use the term. So what you see matters. What you say matters. We'll get into bullying and those kinds of things. And what you send matters. And again, we'll use the term nudes in the high school talk, but we won't use that term in the middle school talk because we don't use that term with middle schoolers. But what you send matters. Again, anytime that your kids are, if they are under the age of 18, if they are taking sexually explicit photos of themselves and sending them, they are guilty of, depending on the state and the severity of what they sent, guilty of at least a misdemeanor or a felony because they have produced, they're in possession of, and they're guilty of distribution of child pornography. I used to say, when I would say that, because again, we only use those terms to talk about that in the high school presentation. I used to say, and we're going to have police officers at every door on your way out checking your phone. And those kids like, ugh! You just know, okay, all right, these 12 right over here, but it's really mean, so I stopped saying that. It was just more for my internal joy and really sick humor. But to be able to kind of help them realize that what you see matters, what you say matters, what you send matters, what you stand for matters. Standing for when you're seeing other people harmed, but also realizing you need to stand up for yourself at times as well. And if that means getting help and counseling, then that means getting help and counseling. That means actually really truly believing that you are valuable and you do matter and you were created in the image of God and you are one for whom Christ died. And those kinds of things you need to realize you need to stand for yourself. And then we give them some tips on how to help create a better relationship with social media and technology. So we used to dive a little bit deeper into the apps and some of those things, but I think that I wanted to take one more step back and say, if you realize that your identity and value are rooted in God and not rooted in the amount of likes, comments, and followers you have on social media, that there's going to be some things that you're going to say, because this is true, that I'm not going to be tempted and enticed in these ways. So I want to give them a more of a solid foundation. And it's been a long time since these kids have sat down for 45 minutes to an hour and heard that they matter over and over and over again. Our kids need to be reminded that they matter. And it's not dependent on, again, their social media. It's rooted in who they are as humans. And it cannot go up or down. It is set at the price of our Savior. That's incredible. And so there's been a ton of times after their student talks, and some of them would just come and say, "Can I give you a hug?" And I look at the adults in the room, like, "Is that okay?" And they'll say, "Yeah." So, but I've had farm boys from Iowa with tears in their eyes coming up. And I sent a picture that went around the school my freshman year. He's a senior in high school, and he's like, "And I have blamed myself and thought terrible things about myself for all of these years, and you helped me see that I matter." And I was like, that's the goal of what we're wanting to do with this age group, to remind them that they're created in the image of God and they're one for whom Christ died, and so is everybody else, so we need to treat them that way. So that's a long answer to kind of get to what you're at. Our goal was to end at quarter after. There's some other things that are going to be going on. Our goal is for me to end at quarter after. I know it's advertised for you for 8:30, because there's some other stuff that's going to happen, all right? So I'm going to hand over the microphone. And so thank you so much for letting me spend time with you this evening and with your children tomorrow.
Thank you, Doug. We appreciate, our motto here is equip and inspire. And I know as a parent, I feel equipped tonight with some more tools in this area, this ever-changing area. And I know that his words probably landed different with all of you, If you have little ones, you're like, okay, good, I got time. If you have kids in school already, you're going, oh, man, if I could go back, you know. But I love Doug's message, there's hope, because all of this is rooted in the Word, and that doesn't change. So grateful for your words. We're excited for tomorrow, for you to talk to our upper elementary kids, middle and high school. We know we're going to be blessed by that as well.